It is perhaps a cruel twist of fate, quite unintentional on my part, that I'm releasing this review of Arkane's Dishonored in the wake of the studio's latest offering, Redfall. Whilst the thunderous typing of every organisation of the gaming critique variety all coalesces in an almighty crescendo of condemnation of the studio's latest game, I will look back instead at one of the greatest games that Arkane has ever made. Today we're talking about Dishonored. Releasing worldwide to critical acclaim on October 9, 2012, Dishonored tells a grim story of treachery and immoral acts in a city besieged by an almost apocalyptic level plague event. The city of Dunwall provides the backdrop for this excellent story. Of course, being the Deus Ex inspired immersive sim that it is, Dishonored is in fact a tale of two cities. Dunwall is malleable, and the state of the city by the end of the game will be determined by your actions as the game's beleaguered protagonist, the Royal Protector, Corvo Attano. Over the course of this review, we'll be looking at the story Dishonored tells, its themes and influences, and discovering why it's still one of the greatest stealth games of all time, even over 10 years later.
What shall we do with the drunken sailor? What shall we do with the drunken sailor? What shall we do with the drunken sailor? Early in the morning, way hey and up she rises, way hey and up she rises, way hey and up she rises, early in the morning.
Unlike in previous episodes of this series where I've usually just dived straight into the plot head first, I'd instead like to mix things up a little this time and talk about the world Dishonored takes place in, because I believe that it's crucial to the tones and themes that the story touches upon. Dunwall is a city in crisis, and a city divided. It is a harsh reminder of the steep costs of progress which plagued our own development during the Industrial Revolution. It is a city in which the nobles laugh and drink wine in their grandiose mansions whilst the lower classes wander aimlessly, zombie-like, eventually curling over and dying of the plague literally right outside the walls. It is a city dominated by a powerful, fundamentalist religious sect, whilst certain locals are driven mad, found to be in possession of curious heretical runes carved out of whalebone. It is a city in which whole districts are abandoned, retreated from in the wake of floods and plague walkers, all the while part of an empire seeking to expand its borders to the Isles and beyond. It is a city that has harnessed the incredible power of electricity and taken great strides in technological advancement and built on the backs of many, yet the fruits of which have thus far only been enjoyed by a chosen few. It's all terribly depressing, and as such, a melancholy yet utterly fascinating backdrop for a video game. As the Royal Protector, Corvo Attano, you can mould the city via your actions even further, which I shall discuss over the course of this review. In the game's cold open, you're thrust head first into the world of Dishonored. As the Empress's personal guard, and perhaps even more, you find yourselves in the shoes of Corvo Attano, returning home from a long voyage overseas. Alas, your mission was in vain, a feeble attempt to find any kind of cure or hope for a cure to the horrendous plague that rips through the streets of the city around you. Corvo returns to Dunwall Tower, the seat of absolute power in the Empire, currently held by Empress Jessamine Caldwin I. Corvo returns with grim news. No aid was to be found anywhere amongst the other isles. However, before meeting with the Empress, he has a quick run-in with her daughter and heir to the throne, Emily Caldwin. She'll become important later. Additionally, one quick tutorial on stealth mechanics in the form of a child's game of hide-and-seek later, you'll also spot Anton Sokolov, ingenious scientist and talented painter, the local Renaissance man. He'll become important later. Upon meeting with Jessamine, she'll seek your counsel. Sadly, this reunion is cut short as mysterious assailants quite literally blink in out of nowhere, making an attempt on her life. Corvo does what he can, but is ultimately outnumbered and magically outgunned, suspended as he is high up in the air. In front of your and her daughter's eyes, Empress Caldwin is assassinated, cut down by a curious man in red. He's pretty important right now and will continue to be so later. Before Corvo has a chance to do anything, the assassins disappear, taking the princess with them. Conveniently, Corvo is then found over the body of the Empress, discovered by her definitely not nefarious spy master and the Lord Overseer. He's promptly accused of her murder and whisked off to Coldridge Prison. Like all good villains, during your prison torture, the spy master and Lord Overseer spill all, revealing their evil plans, having the Empress killed, her heir hidden away, and using the convenience of Corvo's timing for him to take the fall. Honestly, these two are terrible torturers. Now, I don't know a whole lot about torture, but surely the onus is on Corvo to spill the beans here, not the torturers themselves, right? They're just there to gloat. They'd be twirling their moustaches if they even had a single hair between them. Anyway, fortunately, 6 months into your sentence, a ray of hope appears, as it so often does in classic prison breaks, in the form of a tasty baked good. Under this loaf of bread is a key to the cell, and instructions as to where Corvo should go upon successfully accomplishing the impossible and escaping Coldridge Prison. Spoiler alert, it's the pub. Upon escaping prison, you make your way to the pub. Great stuff. The Hound Pit's pub will function as your hub for the rest of the game, as Corvo teams up with Vice Admiral Havelock and Lord Pendleton, allies of convenience who would apparently see Emily rescued and returned to the throne as the rightful heir that she is. This is accomplished by undertaking a series of missions over the course of a few days, removing the Lord Overseer from power, dispatching the corrupt Pendleton twins whilst rescuing Emily, abducting Anton Sokolov, silencing the evil spy master turned Lord Regent's mistress, as well as finally taking down the main man himself. However, Corvo will not be going it alone, relying purely on flesh and steel. No, after his first night at the pub, he experiences a curious dream that absolutely wasn't brought on by one too many. A dream that takes him to a mysterious land far removed from time and space. He's taken to the void. Indeed, perhaps the central gimmick around Dishonored is the magical powers that Corvo can utilise to aid him on his quest of redemption and/or revenge. Upon waking up in the void while spending that first night at the Hound Pit's pub, Corvo meets the Outsider. The Outsider is a particularly mysterious character that really isn't elaborated on that much over the course of the game. The best way that I can think to describe him really is that he's basically a bored god, popping into the mortal realm every now and then to bestow people of personal interest to him with crazy magical powers just to see what happens. Think Q from Star Trek, but significantly broodier. I must mention at this point that, much like Deus Ex, Dishonored gives you options in how you can dispatch your various targets. Sure, you can blow your way through the entire city, murdering everyone in your path, including innocent civilians on the way to your targets, or you can be a lot more methodical, silent in your approach, dispatching only your enemies in shadow, or perhaps even sparing their lives but dooming them to fates that could perhaps be considered the less preferable option to a quick death.
It's only natural that you be curious about what I intend to do with the Pendletons. See, the Pendletons got these rock mines, have hundreds of souls working down there 1/2 mile deep below ground. So I'm gonna shave their heads and cut out their tongues and put them in one of their own stinking mines. Then they're gonna see life from a different angle.
Needless to say, I prefer the second route. I should also mention that going for this low chaos route, so to speak, limits the spread of the plague around Dunwall, spawning less victims and rat packs, also eventually unlocking the good ending. Having said all of that, despite mainly playing the game as a pacifist, I do tend to make 1 or 2 exceptions.
That might be what you...
Regardless, the magical gifts that the Outsider bestows upon you, courtesy of his mark being burned onto your hand, function as several different abilities that can help you navigate the dangerous streets of Dunwall. Blink is fairly rudimentary, a short-range teleport spell which can admittedly be upgraded and is very useful at getting to hard-to-reach areas. However, there are some more fun toys to play with, such as Possession, first limited only to rats, but eventually to humans, as well as my favourite, Bend Time. This first slows things down, but eventually halts time completely. As to how you choose to use these powers, to be a thief in the night, a ghost, or a rampaging maniac, is entirely up to you. As well as your powers from the Beyond, Corvo also has several more conventional gadgets that can be used to have a word with the local guardsmen. First up is the crossbow.
Sometimes you've got to make a silent takedown.
The crossbow comes with several different kinds of ammunition, namely regular bolts, incendiary bolts, and sleep darts. Regular bolts are standard. They can be used as offensive lethal weaponry or simply fired off as a diversion. Incendiary bolts do what they say on the tin, and are utterly marvellous at setting things on fire. Finally, sleep darts will be your best friend in a low chaos, non-lethal playthrough, as any folks finding themselves on the receiving end of these fellas will simply take a nice little nap and subsequently live to see another day. Additionally, Corvo can utilise a gun, grenades, and a vicious trap called a spring razor, which rips its unsuspecting victims apart upon detonation. Naturally, you won't find too much use for these in a more non-lethal run. Finally, Corvo also comes equipped with a blade, permanently assigned to one of his hands and as such taking up quite a bit of real estate on your controlling instrument of choice. This is something that I've always found a bit odd, considering that should you play the game in a nice, friendly, knock out and move on kind of way, you'll find barely any use for the blade. I think that perhaps there should have been an option to switch it out. Regardless, you'll note that Corvo has quite the arsenal to tackle almost any situation that he comes across, and the game's level design complements his philosophy too. Despite most of Dishonored's levels being mostly linear, as far as corridors go, they're very open corridors. Each level can be undertaken and completed in a variety of different ways, resulting in different outcomes and interactions with certain NPCs. For example, in the first proper mission, you'll be tasked with killing High Overseer Thaddeus Campbell, this familiar fella here. Now, you could just do as you're told, bumping him off and chucking him in the bin. Or, there's an alternative. Upon exploring more of the office of the High Overseer, you'll come across a curious and distinctly unpleasant looking chamber. This is where heretics are branded, before being excommunicated from society and thrown to the wolves, so to speak. Wouldn't it be a shame if the High Overseer himself suffered such a grim fate? Almost every level in the game has alternative solutions like this, though despite their non-lethal nature, I'd hesitate to say whether they could be considered merciful or not. Regardless, the final mission in this section of the game involves taking down the Lord Regent himself through straight up murder or exposing him and his crimes to the world. Turns out the plague was an import from the mysterious, largely unexplored land of Pandyssia. The then royal spy master introduced the plague to Dunwall to instill chaos, ultimately using the calamity to remove the Empress from the picture and seizing the throne for himself. Of course, in the spirit of being an absolute muppet, he recorded a mixtape of his crimes and left it in his bedroom. So you could just kill the guy and call it a day, or use the convenient dystopian announcement system that Dunwall employs to broadcast the Regent's crimes to all.
They hid from the catchers and bred a sick fate.
I beg you.
Soon it didn't matter.
You nearly
Rich,
destroyed
poor,
the
all
city.
were falling
No
sick.
amount of money will undo that.
Then people began to ask questions.
Get him ready for the walk to Coldridge.
The Empress
Prison.
assigned
Yes,
me
sir.
to investigate whether the rats had been imported by a foreign power.
Ending his reign in a much more satisfying way, if you ask me. After this, it's time to pat yourself on the back and go about your merry way. The day saved, right? Nope. Dishonored has one last trick up its sleeve. Once back at the pub, the time for celebration is at hand. Everyone is there, excitedly talking about the next stage. Emily will be restored to the throne. Havelock and Pendleton will take their places by her side, pudding for all. Sharing a toast, you join in on the celebrations, only to quite suddenly and mysteriously take ill, stumbling towards your bedchamber. Should you have played the game a reasonable man, i.e. not bumping off anyone and everyone that had the misfortune to cross your path, then your previous water Uber servicer and top 10 bro in gaming, Samuel the Boatman, will save you, only administering half the poison, allowing you to survive Havelock, Pendleton and Martin's grisly and treacherous plot. Upon waking up in and navigating your way through the grim, all but abandoned flooded district, you'll finally encounter the Empress's assassin himself, Dowd. Dowd also finds himself imbued with the same powers you do, leading you to quite the duel should you decide to engage him directly. Otherwise, he can simply be knocked out silently if you know what you're doing. Killing him is optional, though most definitely not canon. After your close encounter with the unkind, you'll find yourself back in the Hound Pits pub. Upon liberating fierce rivals, now turned best friends, Piero and Sokolov, you'll pursue the treacherous nobles to the giant lighthouse, where they've decided to hold themselves up for the time being. Assuming you've undertaken the low chaos route as I did, by the time you catch up to them, Havelock has seemingly lost the plot, poisoning both of his co-conspirators and putting up barely any resistance as you shut him down. Upon removing Havelock from the equation whichever way you see fit, Emily is rescued, to be reinstated to the throne, ever under your watchful eye as royal protector. The final state of the game is determined by your route. Should you have gone the, I assume, canonical low chaos route, there will be an era of peace and a golden age for Dunwall, as the plague is cured and everything is restored to how it was, now under the rule of a gracious Emily Caldwin. There are alternative endings which I shall leave for you to discover should you ever play this excellent game. Thus concludes Dishonored, one of the greatest stealth games ever made in my opinion. I recall being incredibly hyped for it back in the day when the initial promotional materials for the game came out, and it lived up to and exceeded my wildest expectations. Between its gripping, malleable story of twists and turns, its top-notch adaptable stealth gameplay and solid world building, it rightfully takes its place amongst the other paragons of the genre. Fortunately, despite its very complete ending, the story doesn't end there. Upon completing Dishonored, you can load up its crucial DLCs, The Knife of Dunwall and The Brigmore Witches, which follow the story of the Empress's killer, Dowd, bridging the gap between the first and the eventual second game. It also introduces another very important character, Billy Lurk. Naturally, I will be covering the excellent and perhaps even superior Dishonored 2 at some point in the not too distant future. However, in the meantime, please consider joining me next time when I'll be talking about a different game. We'll be returning to the beginning of my experience with gaming, hitting the slopes and tackling the first of an exemplary PlayStation 2 winter sports quadrilogy.